session is very much based around building better businesses thriving within the hospitality sector. And our panelists will be talking through a range of different themes based on the challenges, and I don't think there's no denying the fact that the number of challenges that we're all facing at the moment in the sector, but also potentially some of the challenges that happen even within Liverpool, but also challenges bring lots of opportunities as well. So we'll get our panelists to talk about that as well. With regards to what they do in their own specific businesses, we'll learn about their experiences, what they do in kind of really push boundaries, and hopefully some takeaways for you guys. It's almost like golden nuggets to take away and start trialling and testing in your specific businesses and operations. Also looking at the trends as well, so in terms of what's happening and what's been trending over the last couple of years, and also what does the hospitality sector look like over the next couple of years as well. And I was only, in fact, this morning I woke up in the hotel and thought, let me go onto ChatGPT and ask it what are the trends, what does it think it's the trends for hospitality over the next couple of years or for the future? And there's probably about 3 or 4 themes that came out of it. And I promise I didn't even almost preempt it, but it was technology, it was automation, it was personalization, experiences, and sustainability. So some of that will certainly resonate with you guys as well. So with further ado, I'd love to introduce you to the panel. I'm not going to take or steal their thunder, but I'll let them introduce themselves, talk about their experiences, who they are, what they do, and then we'll kick it off. So I'll pass you over to Louise first.
Yeah, I'm Louise Kemp, we know quite a few of you in the room. I'm co-owner of 19 Agency. We are a specialist hospitality marketing and PR agency based in the city centre. Not just working in Liverpool, we work all over the UK with the likes of me&u, all the various different operators. And hello.
Hi, I'm Dan Davies. I'm the chief exec of Rockpoint Leisure, which is a regeneration company in New Brighton. We've been trying to turn the fortunes around there. Started in hospitality when I was 18, about 16. Last left there, I was licensing at 18. I started a company called CPL Training Group, which I ran for over 30 years. And we trained about 4 million people a year in 28 countries. Obviously, when we started, it was quite a small business. And we grew, so we had offices in Accra in Liverpool, Cyprus, St George's Square, a big office over the water, with 250 people in. When we started, it was face-to-face training. And then we migrated over as well to include a big e-learning division. So we want to be companies that brought us over like machine learning and big data and things like that. We have clients from, local corner shop to Shape My Habit and Coca-Cola, and we ran that for a long period. But also on the regulation side, so it's on the board of UK Hospitality, which is for sort of hospitality industry. The like association, which most managed sort of multiple operators are part of. BII is the sort of individual, British Beer and Pub Association is the sort of brewers. UK Hospitality is operators from small, medium and large companies. And also I'm the chairman of the Institute of Licensing, so that is anything licensed from the likes of Glastonbury to the Shard, to tattoo parlours, barber shops, taxis and everything like that. We cover in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. So from a regulatory sort of side, there's only a few of us who really sit as operators and regulators. And the Sasha in Manchester, but I taught Manchester Sasha Lord. I met a couple of other people like that. So at the moment it's sort of chairman of the Institute of Licensing, so we're board of UK Hospitality and CEO of Rockpoint.
It's quite hard to live up to that. Not as many titles on my side, unfortunately. I'm Daniel Gillbanks. I'm one of the founders of Pins Social Club. Whoever hasn't been to Pins yet, Pins is me and my best friend had an idea of a modern adaptation of a social club together, and we thought it would be a really good idea to turn this massive car park into this crazy entertainment space. So we opened 4 or 5 weeks just before COVID hit in February, and it's been a bit of a rocky road during that period, but it's also been a really exciting road after that, where we're a concept based, centered around activities, centered around food and drink, and entertainment.
Amazing. As you can see, we've got two Dans that have not made it easy for me. So the middle Dan will refer to Dan D and then Dan G at the end as well. So in terms of the challenges that we're facing at the moment, what do you see, certainly, in your own businesses, but also from consumers, what they're facing? So Louise, do you want to kick us off?
Obviously, cost of living is the biggest one at the moment. People are having to refine the choices they make in terms of hospitality. So we found it during the 2008 crash, I'm old enough to remember that people were less likely to dine out casually and more likely to dine out for a treat or for that feel-good factor. So that's definitely something we're seeing repeated now. People wanted a bit more of an experience out of the money that they're spending rather than, I don't know, no offence to Nando's, but rather than Nando's sort of 2-3 times a week, you're more likely to save and, go for that splurge over the weekend or over the week. So that's definitely something we've noticed with our client roster, really, is the more casual diners we're having to work a lot harder to get customers in. The more premium venues, it's weekend trades. I think we've also noticed a trend in small to medium operators closing early week, so closing those really quiet times, Monday, Tuesday, just to not heat the venue as often or not staff it as much. They're definitely things as marketers that we're seeing that would never really cross our door, but those sorts of communications from our clients are, we can't afford to be open 7 days a week. So that's definitely something we've seen. But yeah, in terms of trends, we're having to work harder for that customer and shout louder.
Sure. Just a quick question on that. Do you see regional differences and the challenges that every sector, every region within the UK face?
Yes and no. I think city bases like Liverpool, which is a visitor economy, you've got other parties sort of pushing that for you, pushing that scene. Rural locations, that is a hard market at the moment. We've seen people going from, revenues of 60-70k a week down to 30 and just about covering costs, which is difficult. But it tends to be out of town venues. You've also got small operators, which we don't necessarily work with, in townships, which are doing really well. People don't have to travel, they don't have to put petrol in the car, they can just walk to the local. So it's a tough one. It depends on where you are. Sure. But I'd say city centre-wise, London-based operators, absolutely no problem. But I do think it's that tourism input that helps.
Sure. Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, London's a ball. I'm most people in London fit the north, like Islington. So it is a lot more challenging, and they have a big, it's a big throughput of people in London. I think for the industry, how many do you run like individual venues, or how many of you are chains? Right. I mean, it's a double hit really, because you've got your operating costs, which have gone through the roof, from energy, the price of everything going up from your suppliers, but then your customers are getting hit. If somebody had 500 quid, a year ago disposable income a month, fast forward a year, and they're probably minus 500 quid. So people have got a lot less money in their pocket. And I think the experiential stuff's important, but also, I remember the 2008 crash and all before it. And the advice I'd say is that in a downturn or in a time when you have got more time to think, rather than just laying people off, retrain, refocus. So we will come out the other side of this. There will be more failures, but if you can sort of use the opportunity to sort of retrain your staff, refocus your team, you're going to be out the blocks a lot faster than anyone else. I mean, you see it like with Wetherspoons when they had the lockdown, they said, go their job in Tesco. That's just, I think, like an appalling way to behave, and that's the big sort of corporate, chains. I think that, using the opportunity to actually think about your business. Often when you're busy, you're right in the middle of it and you don't get thinking time, and just to be able to step back and say, actually, what is our offer? Is it good enough? What is, who are our customers? Try and get that sort of insight and things like that. So when you do start seeing things picking up later in the year, you're ready to actually, act on it and maximise the sort of potential. But it is tough trading out there, and it's tough as well in the fact that the costs are just so fluid at the moment, and they are going up. It is quite hard to budget and plan a bit like this. And there's also more regulation of things coming down the line as well.
Amazing. And Benji?
Yeah, I think one of the things you just touched on there really is about added value. Like, I think, when things do get difficult in terms of trading and operating on that side of things, as guests probably start to look at the idea of what are they getting more valued for. I went down to a conference down in London a couple of weeks ago. They were talking about, I think it was the MD of Gusto. He was talking about how they always used to put a strong emphasis on doing discounts all the time and things like that. And I think a lot of businesses tend to try and bring guests in by focusing on discounting, and maybe sometimes that guests can see through that, but also it creates that element of maybe devaluing the proposition slightly. And what the MD of Gusto was saying was they actually, after COVID, they reviewed all of that, and I think they used some data to be able to review how that worked, and it was all about, maybe Gusto wasn't about discounting and constantly getting high volume and number of people in, but actually, like you were saying before, it's a treat, it's an experience, and they actually value more the level of quality of the food, so improving that side of things, what are the decor of the venues looking like, and focusing on that element rather than constantly getting a extra number of visits. And the data suggested afterwards that they're actually making more money, less visits of guests coming in because they're treating it as a treat, but also having a much better guest experience as a result.
Amazing. So in terms of what you guys are doing differently in your three businesses, very, very different. Obviously Louise, you're an agency, work with various different formats. Obviously Dan, you're doing some regen stuff as well, but you've also got the kind of training culture piece behind it, obviously, which is very much a trend at the moment, is obviously what you're doing with Tinstan. But Louise, if we start off with you in terms of what you're doing differently, where you're kind of really pushing the boundaries. I think we've always got to set the scene in terms of there are challenges, but there's lots of great things that operators are doing, so it'd be good to kind of share some of that as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of our clients are seeing it as an opportunity to refocus where they sit in the landscape. Is the guest the same as what it was when they wrote the brand guidelines 6 years ago? Probably not. So we're doing a lot of looking at who the guest is, across the board really. Focused massively on data at the moment. We've got an amazing team who solely just look at how many people was open in E5. We can track right through to actual visits and stuff like that, obviously working with guys like you. So we're putting a lot of emphasis. I think databases for a long time was a huge focus, particularly in the company Anna and I used to work for. We were heavily focused on driving a database growth, which we've just got installed in us now. It's just like second nature. And I think we come across quite a few operators who don't understand the true value of that data, and we spend a lot of time educating that again, working with your team, Dhilon, to show operators how to monetize that database. So, not just kind of lashing out an e-flyer because you need to once a month, actually thinking about what people want to hear about. We've got one of our clients, Pizza Punks, have done a whole campaign just based on cost of living crisis. So, they know their customer base is generally students, young adults. I think pretty much every day of the week there is something you can get added value. It's not a discount, it's 2 pizzas a bottle of wine for 20 quid, something like that. So, actually speaking in those languages and packaging it all to speak to that database. But I think for us, the focus has always been and will be made to be data and monetising that database.
Amazing. Dan, do you want to?
Yeah, I think from our side, we have multiple different things going on within the venue, and I think trying to understand guest behaviour, and you know, for a lot of our guests coming in, they focus on dwell time, so you know, they could end up coming in for bowling, and then there's live entertainment happening right next to them, so they decide to stay and they continue drinking. But it can be very, very difficult to kind of track and understand what is that customer behaviour and try to get an understanding of that. And although maybe we are a big venue in the sense of high volume of people coming in, the infrastructure's we never had that in place previously to understand that information and kind of go, okay, you know, when we put that marketing promotion out there, or this idea on social, or whatever it may be, this campaign, is it tapping into what guests actually want? And is that, you know, the demand for things are constantly changing, and getting an understanding of that. And I think it's more important than ever with, you know, this isn't a plug for Mr. Young, by the way, but I'm just saying it's working with things like that and understanding the power that they can have to feed that information back, even for whether it be big or small businesses. And the important element here is that small businesses can do it as well, is use that information and maybe capitalise more on whatever your marketing strategy or whatever offering you're putting out in terms of product, to use that information and improve it properly, rather than maybe just working aimlessly sometimes. And having the people to come in and be able to understand and focus that. Recently, Hess is in the audience at the moment, we've just hired somebody to come in and effectively be head of marketing and sales, or is head of marketing and sales for us, but kind of get those things in order, because trading, we've been busy and things like that, but are we knowing what customers are wanting, and are we foreseeing what customers are going to want in the future is really important.
Amazing, thanks, Dan.
I think technology is dead important, and data, knowing who your customers are. But on the other hand, you've also got a set of eyes and ears, and I think we are in the hospitality trade, and that you should never, you can't, I don't believe, manage a business completely remotely in hospitality. You need to be front of house. You need to be actually talking to people. You've got to do a combination of that. And that way yourself, I sit with a lot of people who run companies on some of these boards that never pulled a fucking pint before. They've never been on the front line before, and they're making decisions in boardrooms that really they don't totally understand. One of my old pals, Dave Mansbridge, with Adventures, he understands about being on the shop floor as well, actually going and speaking to people. But if you're going to have your regular sort of clientele, then you've got the visitor economy and things. And just having those talks and speaking to people, you will get a lot of insight from that. When we started the regeneration in New Brighton, the main road it was on, literally nearly 50% of the businesses been all boarded up. So pubs, restaurants, shops, businesses, to all still shuttered up. There's flight happening everywhere, vandalism, antisocial behaviour. And in 2018, I started selling CPL. I just thought, well, let's just try something different. After spending like 20 years with me in London, and people ask where I lived, I'd just think of the pool, because could be asked to explain where New Brighton was. And I just thought, well, what if we just, buy, rent, or lease every single boarded up place on the road, which we did. And then the first year we didn't actually open anywhere because they were all semi-derelict, or we needed refurbing. And then we just started opening up places. But the first thing we did was got all the kids together, of course, with problems, and said, listen, do you want to live in the shithole, or do you want to actually help tidy the place up? So we had all the kids who caused problems and high visits, and they'd clean the flight tipping up, painting lampposts, sanding benches down. I brought a later over from LA to give them a bit of talk about, they think they're in a gang. You want to speak to a couple of people from South Central and explain exactly what a gang is. And then we basically just started. I wanted to keep every big brand off the road, because every high street looks exactly the same. If you blind, we were blindfolded and parachuted into 90% of high streets in the UK, and the blindfold sector, if you know what the fuck you were, we all look the same. So we wanted to keep the big brands out, and operate some ourselves, but find operators as well, find people who just wanted to start a business, and give them maybe a bit of seed funding, and a bit of platform and opportunity. So we opened up the Davies shop for about 7 years at the railway, which was, it was always up as windows put through, and when it was open, the first question the pub quiz was, "Who the fuck are you looking at?" It was quite a rough pub. And then we opened that to James Averton. James Averton was a guy who founded New Brighton. New Brighton used to be 170 acres of sand dunes. James Averton, who used to live in Everton, used to live over at them. And he went over in 1830, bought 170 acres of sand dunes, went down to the south coast to Brighton, and decided to call them in New Brighton. So when it was sand dunes, it was called Rockpoint, and that's what we called Rockpoint Leisure. So we did a lot of history. I looked around every single seaside town, looking back over to the States, and looked at some, options there. Most seaside towns, I believe, we've got 180-degree land, 180-degree water. So half of us is in water. I very much viewed it as like Brooklyn to Manhattan, with a city on our doorstep, good connectivity, and we need to maximise that. Now, the position we're in though, New Brighton used to be somewhere where you'd travel to. You don't pass through New Brighton, you have to travel to it. And there used to be 2 piers, 11 theatres, the largest open-air baths in the world, the largest ballroom in Europe, and the largest building in the UK, a tower bigger than Blackpool's. There used to be 5.5 million day trippers just coming over from Liverpool. Now all of that went. So what was left was just spiral there in the 18s. It was a lot of heroin problems, and if you went to university and never came back, it was like wiping your face on the way out. And that's really what I wanted to try and turn around. So now we've got a lot of businesses sprouting up. A lot of young, people just starting little businesses there. We run a traditional pub, a restaurant. We've got Rockpoint Records, which is a tattoo parlour, barber shop, 3 art studios, vinyl record store, bar, talent food offering as well. And it's 10 businesses in there. We only run 2 of them. So it's about giving people a sort of a platform, an opportunity, but also there's something called like broken windows theory, which I looked at in the States. And if you have if your immediate environment is going down, if buildings are there with smashed windows, the people start littering, all the windows get smashed, if you don't replace them, if you don't seem to care about your area, it goes into this terminal decline. And what we try to do is fix the things outside our venues, then move into venues and bring it into community sort of cohesion together. So been quite busy in the last few years.
You haven't done that. Amazing. Okay, so obviously we're talking about data, we're talking about customers as well. Obviously that leads into building loyalty and obviously advocacy as well. In your opinion, who's doing it really well, obviously apart from your own business, who's kind of really smashing it out of the park? And also I think as a hospitality sector, we're probably slightly behind from where the retail sector are in terms of driving loyalty and trying to have an extra visit. What's your thoughts on that, Louise, and what keep on you done?
Well, we can't have a saying in the offices, what would D&D do? So we watch their Blake Forks and they just seem to be best in class of everything they put out, really. I mean, visually, just really float by folks, but the language they use, the way they engage their database, the way they engage their audience, for me is exceptional. Probably most operators take the majority of their ideas from D&D because they're great and they've got a big team. They've got a huge platform. Really got so many different restaurants, bars, operations that they just tick all the boxes.
Amazing.
Are we talking just in hospitality or in general?
Even in general, outside of the box, who else is doing it really well?
I think in hospitality, I think particularly maybe relevant to the niche sector I'm in compared to the socialising, people seem to keep coining it these days. There's Flight Club, which I thought was really, I think what they've done is really impressive. I mean, for whoever doesn't know, Flight Club is a darts venue, but it's not just any type of darts venue. They actually hired a NASA engineer in order to be able to deliver the technology that they do to be able to track the dart. They actually they approached the same company that owns the technology that tracks, the tennis ball that tracks at Wimbledon and stuff and tells you whether it's in or out. And the company came back and said, look, we just don't have the technology to be able to track something as thin as a dart, and they just kept getting it wrong and be able to track the scores. So they actually hired a NASA engineer to be able to put the technology together, and effectively if you guys have played darts for near Liverpool or something, but it's really hard to track the score, isn't it? It's an absolute nightmare in terms of, still don't know how to play, pretend to play, but I don't. Well, this technology does it for you, so it just comes up straight on the board as soon as the dart is hit there, tracks the dart, and puts it up on a leaderboard for you. And because they've hired that NASA engineer, because they spent the time in terms of developing that technology to be able to do it, they effectively now own all the IP for that, which has kind of created a massive barrier to entry for them in terms of very, very difficult to replicate that type of technology. So they've scaled that concept really, really well. And I think, going back to what you were saying about technology and how do you incorporate it into hospitality, that's something that they've actually evolved into the product, which I think is really, really interesting.
Amazing. And Dan?
Yeah, that'd be completely right, saying that hospitality is always worked behind retail and manufacturing in automisation. And either that's things like, for a long time you've seen tills in supermarkets go automatic, so you set on a massive bank of people, McDonald's and things like that. If you look at the Amazon factory, they would become less reliant on people. And there's some benefits to that, a robot doesn't have to have an appraisal, doesn't have a bad attitude, turns up all the time. All it needs is electricity. And we're if you look at some of the new cruise liners, for instance, the automatic cocktail makers and things like this, there's a novelty value, things like this that will come down in price. And I think we are going to have more automation right across the board. Now it's a good and bad thing, it's a bit of both. Remember, we are in hospitality, and again, you can't take back people sort of experience away. People want to, for example, like ordering from a table, get your bill on time, often pisses me off more than you're trying to, someone wanted to pay the bill and you can't. So there's some good things here. But I think, if we're going to have less staff, the staff we do have got to be absolutely, on the ball. That's really important. There's a lot of people pioneering the ways and doing some good stuff right across the sector, and it's good to share best practice with what other people do, travel around to a couple of different cities, or if you're abroad, go and have a look at different ideas. But also, technology will move forward at a rate, but remember the people side of it as well.
Amazing. And when you talk about trends, so marketing trends, operational trends, how do you see that play out over the next 12 to 18 months?
Well, marketing, I think more of an experience. You've got to get people out to come to your venues or increase direct time and things like that. And it's about the experience they have. So I think this, understanding who your customers are is key, and delivering, and also making sure your team understand who they are. And the bigger you get, the more sites you open. It's a lot easier when you've got, say, your first site, because everyone's bought into, the vision and where you're going. The more you open, or the more you expand, the more challenges that has. Going back to CPL days, we would speak to. So I was in a room with Stonegate, where there was 14 of them in a Reader's office in Telford, and TGR Capital had just given them £1 billion to go and buy 333 M&B pubs, and we got 270 town and city ones. Then they went on the acquisition trail. Now, if you've got, say, 10 people in a room from 10 different sites, all around the country that worked for that one company. A month, 2 months, 3 months after they started working for them, ask some basic questions, tell us a bit about the company you're working for, you'd find you get quite a wildly different sort of approach, and that's why you've got to have a sort of consistency. I mean, making sure your own team know with the journey you're going on is just as important. I keeping that, absolutely on the ball there.
Amazing. And Danju, what's your thoughts in terms of trends and how that evolve over the next few years in hospitality?
I think using social media and things like that is obviously businesses have been able to capitalise on that massively and kind of get their own brand identity and their own message out there. But I think first of all you've got to understand what that message is that you want to deliver out. There's some really cool creative brands that are thinking outside the box. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Thursday dating app. They do some mad campaigns. It's a dating app that only works on Thursday. So the idea is you're not swiping the whole time throughout most of the week, but they do some mad guerrilla marketing really, that's kind of out there campaigns, giving out all sorts of different stuff on the streets and things like that. And what they do also really well is brand collaborations. So understanding what that brand is about and understanding other brands that may align with the similar demographics that you're targeting, and then partnering, I suppose, with them and creating collaborations that kind of gets to share the opportunities of sharing our audiences of which both of them have, and to try to do that on multiple occasions. We've just recently done it with Pressburgers, so we put a coffee counter in what we describe as now the lobby area, so to speak. We wanted to encourage more of the daytime trade and have people coming in the daytime, and our coffee was really, really shit. So we thought, rather than doing it ourselves, bring somebody in who is really good. And Pressburgers, we have conversation with them and we felt like they aligned with our brand.
Sure. So somebody just touched on there where you kind of almost segmented your day path and you try to target different segments of the market with that.
Oh, we targeted them, or why did we do it?
Yeah, we'll both read it, yeah.
I think, going back to what you were saying before about it's very easy, I'm kind of contradicting myself here because I was saying how important data was before, but one of the really, really key things for us is if you look at the business plan that we initially put out a couple of years ago and probably look at what Pins is now is two very different things, and we've really probably only been trading for like just over 12 months. And that has evolved massively since then, and there's one thing creating we had an idea that we thought people would want to be going out to a space where it's not necessarily a nightclub, but there's more things to do and elevate that experience from a food and drink part by combining the activities. But what we thought might work, fortunately on the most part has worked, but there are things that have constantly evolved and constantly changed as we've traded, and it's really using empirical evidence, i.e. watching people and watching your guests, how they use your space and understand, we've got 3 floors, we've got a rooftop and a mezzanine and the ground floor, which all have different types of offerings, and it's understanding how they are using those spaces. And this is a really long-winded way of answering. We put a restaurant space in the front of Pins, and being brutally honest, it's probably the one space that we feel hasn't really been working for us. And it got to a point where we were watching guests use the space everywhere, bar the restaurant space, and they would come and eat in there, but they would eat whether that be in the main bar or when they're doing an activity. So we've gone there, we're kind of going, okay, well, they don't want to be in the restaurant space, so how do we evolve that? And we have this idea of adopting almost like hotel lobby type space, so we put a lot of places down in London, and that's where the theory came, where we thought, okay, well, coffee obviously taps into that daytime more, and it's actually one of the nicest spaces I feel to be in, but it doesn't suit being a restaurant space within the type of venue that we are. So how can we create a venue an area where people feel more comfortable in the daytime? So we put more lounge furniture within the space, recreated it slightly. We're not fully there yet, we're still making a few changes on that sense, but we brought Pressburgers in as well and changed the daytime menu slightly to be able to to tap into that market.
Amazing. Thanks for that insight, Dan. And Louise, what's your kind of thoughts in terms of where the hospitality sector is going on? What are your trends?
Trends, I think, if we're not looking at the next generation that are coming through, then we're going to fail in the next 3 to 4 years. I think I'm quite lucky having older kids, and I see how they consume data, how they consume information to make decisions about what they want to do. And it's TikTok. And, I've seen this past week, I've seen 3 adverts for full-time content creators. That's how people are consuming this next generation. So for us, I think that's a massive trend. It's not something we at the moment are interested in offering as a service, because we believe it has to be internally, it has to be a commitment. I think Izzy did some studies on it. You have to post on TikTok 3 times a day for at least to kind of get the algorithm working for you. So, can't imagine being that committed to it. But again, having seen the other side of it and how my kids definitely consume and make decisions based on what other people are doing, it's where Instagram was probably 8-9 years ago. And I think as businesses, if we're not looking at that and not thinking this is how people are going to make informed choices, then we're going to go wrong somewhere. I think trends-wise, for me, premium leisure, casual dining, whatever, if you're not offering, again, this next generation sound old, I think they're not, but if you're not offering a quick solution for them to pay and leave at the end of their experience, you're going to lose them forever. I think, there's no patience, is what I've seen definitely with my kids. When they finish that experience, when they make that decision that's finished, they want to leave there, but then there's no waiting for that. I think we'll see more and more of that. I'm a bit like that now, really. If I get to the end of a meal and I want to leave, I haven't got the patience to wave somebody down 3 times before they bring the bill. I want to leave, I'm on another meet, or I've got somewhere to be. So I think that's definitely a trend we're seeing more. And, where some of our premium operators maybe 2-3 years ago, when I think Pay at Table was coming in during COVID, would never have engaged with it because they think it plays down the level of service they offer. I think they're opening up conversations now more proactively with us to say it is something we need to look at.
Amazing. I didn't think to say that.
No.
And just lastly, I was to put all 3 of you on the spot. Where do you see hospitality in the next 5 years?
Experiential, giving something extra to the experience.
I suppose I'll probably say the same thing, but experiential. I think just going back to that added value, I think there is that element of instant gratification, I think, of like people wanting things immediately, but there is that also competition in terms of there's a lot more, just even whether it be in competition in terms of more places opening, but competition in terms of visibility. So, you can just get easy access to information so much easier through social media and all the platforms now. And so the option for choice there's much more exposure to it. So staying on top of that and understanding strategies. For example, we've just jumped onto TikTok recently, and it's like we're going to strategize. I didn't realize it's going to be 3 times a day. That's crazy. But like have a different plan for video content, maybe the more you would push on Instagram. And there has to be probably a bigger plan moving forward as to how do you spread that message of what you're about moving forward. And also focusing on that, honing in on what it is that you specifically specialise in, and to create that point of difference from other competition.
Great stuff, Dan.
Yeah, I'd say don't be afraid to do something differently. It's just because everyone's going in one direction, don't be afraid to go completely the opposite direction. Because I think that, knowing what your offer is, knowing who your customers are, but also being willing to collaborate, knowing when you're not going to be good enough at something to collaborate with someone. And depending upon where your venues are, someone can have a great experience inside your venue, but if they walk out and immediately around you is bad experiences, you've got to work harder in some respects, because we've got things like Eurovision coming up. You want the guest experience of somebody who's coming to the city for the first time, for them to go away thinking, "Had a really good time, I want to come back there." People are coming off the cruise lines, where they might have a couple of hours to kill. You want to inspire them to come back to Liverpool and to say it's a really good time. There's other places I want to visit and things like that. And to Todd's way, I think it's good to collaborate with some of the competition or the venues. You want the overall experience to be a good one. That gives you a bit more longevity. But also, you've got to really keep on top of who you are, what your business is, and make sure that your team, are really vetted in this. So you are looking forward, and you can be. One of the benefits of not being a huge company is you can be agile. You can change things if it don't work. It doesn't have to go through. It's not an oil tanker turning round. If it takes ages, decision making can be faster. So how you compete with some of the really big chains that have got massive budgets and things, you've got to be more agile and I'll be able to be quick on your feet.
Fantastic. Let's round of applause, please. I'd like to open it up to the floor now. My runner's just turned up. So we've got the first question.
Just in terms of the local landscape in Liverpool from a hospitality point of view, which is unrecognisable from 20 years ago when there was very limited choice, with the background of the cost of living crisis, is the fact that the city is so competitive now, is that a help or a hindrance to your particular businesses and why? Does that make sense?
Exactly. More.
So with the city being so competitive now, obviously people have got lots of choice but limited budget to spend, do you kind of wish there was less competition again, or is the fact that the city centre's got so much choice that actually helps?
Do you mean competition between other venues? Yes.
Yes.
I definitely think we need more competition in venues, to be honest. I hate to say it, but if you even look at the likes of go across down the M60 to Manchester and you see what's going on there, there's a reason why Liverpool couldn't be aspiring to being, better in a lot of ways from a certain selection of offering the venues. And I think anyone that has the attitude of, I was going to mention this before, but I thought I was rambling over there, but competition is a really, really good thing in a lot of ways. It keeps you to scratch with what you're doing. Doesn't allow you to make sure you don't get complacent. And more importantly, it's a community thing. Behind pins at the moment, we've got 6, 7 empty retail spots at the moment because no one's tapped into them. If a few businesses went into there, we would capitalise on that massively. But also it creates a much better guest experience for people. Rather than come to go all the way over to Duke Street, they may slip off and visit other places on the way, do you know what I mean? There's something to be said sometimes. Ghetto Rough and Baltic Market, I suppose, did it in terms of being the only places in one area and then gentrifying that area and making it something special. But there's also something to be said of clustering and something to be said of creating that community afterwards and feeding off each other is so important.
Yeah, I think just to write on that as well, I think sometimes it helps if you have distinct neighbourhoods within a city, so you can actually know if you go, if you've got a couple of hours to kill, that you can be signposted, to certain areas where you don't get in one restaurant, you get in another, and you can't bounce off each other. Most people don't want to stay home all day and night one day, they do want to move around a bit. Competition is good, it keeps you on your toes. Don't get me wrong, bad operators, if you've got a really fat operator, it can be a bit of a race to the bottom sometimes, but generally competition's good.
Yeah, I've always encouraged competition, as long as I win. We have it most recently with one of our clients where we opened 2 very premium London-based steak houses coming to the city, and it was the battle of the steaks. And again, we just saw it as such an opportunity that no matter what experience you wanted, they're both very different experiences in terms of how you consume, you know, the aesthetics. But people who want a really nice steak are going to go to that area, and there's no 2 ways about it. So it's how you view competition in my eyes, and I think if you look at it as there's more people coming to that area, there's more people looking for that experience, then everybody wins.
Amazing. Any more questions? For one at the back.
You mentioned at the beginning that you asked a group about the concerns or the focus of hospitality, one of them being sustainability and one of them being automation. So I have experience in both. So I used to work for 2 years ago as food waste app, which is up to big on sustainability, and now at Barter, which is automation. And my kind of question is to obviously the hospitality owners is, some of the struggles that we have is actually just trying to get in front of you in order for you guys to be able to move forward, because a part of that is you guys interacting with us as well as, you know, the other way around. So, for example, trying to even get hospitality businesses to even listen about food waste was a massive struggle for us. What's the best way for us to get in front of you, the business owners?
Who wants to tackle that one?
I mean, things like this. I think that there's so much pressure on operators that it is hard sometimes to take a step back. But a lot of problems that you might have aren't unique to you. Other people have got them, and then they overcome them with a solution. And it is important to share practice. Also, there's things like, there are, you know, things like UK hospitality, but if you know, that is entirely made up of operators, multiple retailers, and you know, going to conferences, listening, you know, to what offers are out there, and also looking at who the customers are and getting feedback from them. That's a struggle, but definitely just getting out there and interacting.
To answer your question?
Yeah.
What would also be useful if, I mean, come over quite depends and like show us maybe in a way of like just sometimes visual things, and a lot help really quantify that in the semi-seminar rather than, you know, something you say, oh, when people use it as a mark deployed, every home's sustainable and a B code and this, but there is an element of it's got to be embedded within your brand, and I had a story about Gale's Bakery recently where they have like a waste not policy in terms of they don't want to waste any of their food, because bakeries obviously have a short shelf life and things like that, but they've gone one step further in terms of all the new venues that they open up, and all of the new venues are going to be things from basically renewable processes that they cut in from all the fit out. So they kind of go one step further rather than just saying it's waste not from a food perspective. It's in all of the practices that they do. But yeah, visual ways of quantifying that would be paint the picture.
That's what I was quite as well. I mean, what people often want is they want to tick a lot of boxes, don't say, yeah, we're carbon neutral, green, with this, with that, the other. We're very much this to it, but there's basic things. I mean, we're a borough council who are 454 councils in the neighbourhood, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. They're probably the worst. I think they're horrendous. But we happen to be declared a climate emergency. It's like our only emergency should be where there is an intelligence one, because they literally haven't got a clue what they're doing. But things like we decided, it was pissing down one day. It was looking at all the roofs, you know, walls was lashing down, and thought, why don't we just get water butts? I bought water butts by the drain pipes, and then all the street plants and things, flower beds, we got water using rainwater. I'm going to tell the council it was like it just invested penicillin, and it's like a 20 quid, you know, water bus. So you can do little things like that, which you know. So they talk about these sound bites. They say, "You don't need a fucking clue what they're doing over it." But there's little things you can do like that, and giving a fuck about the environment, about about your immediate environment as well. Just doing it. It's all I'm good saying with this, Matt, the other, the litter outside. Just get into the habit of cleaning up, your immediate space. You start doing it, other businesses start doing it, and it starts then actually making a difference. And then you can go into more detail about how you're really sustainable and everything like that. Get the buy-in of the people who live around the place. If you want to get, ongoing business and things like that, a lot of it is about caring about your immediate environment. And the one thing you can't rely on is that you can't rely on the councils often. They'll always play catch up, and it is up to independent businesses really to blaze the trail. So I think that is, that's really important. We're looking at all sorts of things like sticking beehives on the roofs and various other things like that. Some of this is not rocket science. It's there's a load of stuff you can do that actually has quite a high impact.
Sorry, just to add to that, but too good to go as well. I think a lot of operators definitely that I deal with at MD level, they've just got that much going on that sometimes something can seem too much of a headache for them to engage on. So I think simplifying how they can utilise that service for me would be really similar to what we said about data, is monetise it, speak in an operator's language so they listen.
Brilliant. Any more?
With the biggest category at the moment, 0% alcohol, and 1 in 3 graduates not drinking, how do you think that's going to affect nighttime life and the late night bars?
It's definitely something we've seen actually, and a lot of our clients are working much harder than an alcoholic offering. I mean, where were we last week, Holly? That place in Manchester, I think Tara's cocktails, so about 12 quid. There's no alcohol in it, but it's still crafted that goes into it. So I think, I've definitely seen it again with my kids' generation, that there's not that urgency that I had to go out and get absolutely wasted every single weekend. I do often say to one of my kids are such balls, like interesting girls, but they want something different from that night time. And again, it's that experience that we've been talking about is coming in. I don't even think I don't even know why I'm going to say this, but I don't even think they're not drinking to take drugs or anything like that. They're just healthy living and, the Instagram mentality. So I think offering them that experience that makes them feel good and makes them feel valued, I think is where operators need to go.
It's not alcoholic beer, it's like a snake with no venom. It's a belt. We all have a limited amount of stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's so just you've got things like coffee, soft drinks, all of this. I wouldn't have a massive range. No, they've tried non-alcoholic wine. Absolutely horrendous. So maybe they can dress it up any way they want. I mean, alcohol is alcohol, and there's always people want to, enjoying it more responsibly is something. And if you've got it well done, if you've got decent products, I wouldn't go too much on the completely non-alcoholic stuff. I just think that, and then I also think it's a generational thing. I think that it comes in cycles. So the fact that people aren't personality, fast forward 10 years when we really understand what brutality is, we'll always live in. I think it might well change.
That's good.
I kind of agree, and I kind of doubt in the cycles thing. I mean, I think I don't think it's a case of all of a sudden a generation has just decided to stop drinking. Like it's accumulation of things that have impacted that. Social media can be one of them in terms of you see different places, content creation on TikTok. Is it cool to be seen to be drinking? Similarly in our venue, genuinely one of the things that we were looking at is people are doing different things other than just sitting in a bar and drinking all the time, or vertical drinking type places, and looking for something else to do. So I think there's going to be pressure on businesses to stay on top of that and get creative in terms of coming up with ways to, whether it be non-alcoholic drinks or whether it be offerings that give people a reason to go outside of the house more, then there's going to be pressure on them to be able to deliver that and combine that, because I think it is a trend. I don't think it's a trend, I think it's something here that's to stay, and it's just going to evolve. But that's not to say that people aren't going to drink either, at least I hope they're not. But it's something that we're going to have to cater to, and I think it's like, 10 years ago, would you have seen as many vegan dishes on the menu now? It's one of those things that customer behaviour is changing, and it's just how you're going to improvise your proposition to be able to conform to that.
I think as well there's a safety element. Again, to that drinking culture, there's a lot of younger adults, and obviously, every age group who feel quite unsafe surrounded by people who are drunk and disorderly, and people being spiked. I think we also need to acknowledge that there's a generation who are out now who missed 2 years of socialising those space, 2 years where you make them mistakes. And again, I know from my daughter, scares the living daylights out of her, of being out of control and not being able to get home. So I do think it's not something that will go away. I think.
But just on that point, I mean, definitely what we've moved a lot in the safe. It is in the case of safety. So a lot of irresponsible drinks promotions have been found. The sort of, when we were running places in the late 80s, 90s and stuff, you had all sorts of dentists chirping, robbing drinks down, and I think that has changed. It's probably a good thing. So, and also you're selling more premium stuff as well. There's not when I first started the pub in this one water, I had pint of Foster's, and we don't sell it here, mate. They sell it at the road in the street now. Do you know what I mean? It's not about going in and just getting shit-faced. And you can have alcohol and enjoy it responsibly, and be perfectly fine. It's about, and also you've got a case of people you're dead right in the sense, but a couple of years lockdown did an immense amount of damage in the education system. University, so imagine paying for a university degree and that you spend most of the time doing it online. The whole point of going to university was to have that experiential thing, to meet people, to get away from your parents or whatever. To be locked up and just doing online courses and things is a terrible thing. It's like going to buy a motor of Earth or something, and then when you get there they've given you an Xbox. So if I actually have the car, just go home and use the Xbox where they can have a driving game on it. So there is an amount of people who did go out, and as you say, make those mistakes, get experience of going out. But, I think there's only a bit, I think we've got rid of a lot of the bad sort of sort of drinking culture. In a lot of city centres it has reduced, but it often gets pushed out to the suburbs, and there is still a big problem. What you've got to be careful of is that it doesn't get regulated too much, because you've seen in Scotland we've got 5 licensing objectives, and then in Wales we've got 4. The 5th one in Scotland is public health, and we've seen sugar tax come in, we've seen a whole host of other stuff. That's minimum unit pricing in Scotland. These sorts of things will impact your business, and I think that's why if you're responsible as an operator and that people are responsible, there's less likely of having regulation where you're told to do something. Regulation costs money, and it also restricts you having more conditions on your licence. So if you have problems in your place, just sticking the condition on your licence, you've got to have plastic glasses. Well, but people don't want to drink premium drinks in plastic glasses half the time. So you've got to be careful to run this sort of place and self-police yourself. If you have incidents that are linked to, the alcohol withdrawals or things like that, there's more chance of people potentially being closed down, but also them coming in saying you've got to have X, Y, and Z, which makes it a lot harder for you to operate.
Thank you very much. We all good? Yeah, perfect, brilliant. I'd like to say thanks very much to Megan and the team. Don't hold on, I would also like to say thank you guys. You guys make it obviously special, and we're also doing a lot more this year as well. So thank you very much to all of you as well. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to the panelists as well. I've had a huge amount, great insight. Hopefully you guys will go away and take away some golden nuggets from what you've said today. And so, huge round of applause for the three panelists.